You're standing in a grocery store line with a full cart, and for the first time in years, you don't do the math. No quiet tallying, no quick mental subtraction to see what's left in your account, no spike of adrenaline waiting for the card reader to approve the charge. You just tap your card and walk out. Nothing flashy happened, no applause, but something fundamental shifted, and you can feel it, even if you can't quite explain it yet. This moment almost never
Looks like
feels
a head
dramatic
gasket.
when
It's
it
a big
happens.
job. How much
It
and how
sneaks up
long?
on you.
About $2,000. It'll be
And for a
done by
lot of
Friday.
people,
Friday?
it arrives right after
Where
their
is that
first
document?
real
It has
income
to be
breakthrough.
here. This makes
Not
no
wealth,
sense. It's all wrong.
not freedom.
The key piece is missing.
Just the first month where the numbers finally cross a line they've been circling for years. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus is a freelance graphic designer in his late 20s. For a long time, his income hovered in a narrow band. Enough to survive, never enough to relax. Rent got paid, groceries got bought, but there was no margin, no buffer. Every month ended at roughly zero, and every unexpected expense felt like a small emergency. That kind of financial life doesn't scream crisis.
Hey, good to
but
see
it
you.
quietly
You too.
taxes you
Busy
every
day?
day.
Always.
Then
Catch
one
you later.
month, 3 clients hit at once.
Hello, can you hear me?
A larger
Yes,
project
I hear
wraps
you.
up.
Great. Let's
A couple
review the data.
invoices land
Ready when you
closer
are.
together than usual.
What? This
At
can't
the
be
end of the
happening.
month,
I have to fix
Marcus
this now.
realizes he made
Come
just
on,
over
work.
$5,000. It's the first time in his life he's ever seen that number attached to his own work. What changes next has very little
There we
to do
go,
with
all
the money
confirmed.
itself. A few
Simple
weeks
as
later,
that.
Marcus is on a call with a potential client discussing a longer contract. In the past, these conversations were mentally exhausting. While the client talked, part of Marcus's brain was always somewhere else, running background calculations. When is rent due? Did that credit card payment already clear? How long can I float expenses if this client pays late? That internal noise made it almost impossible to fully hear what was being asked. This time, something is different. The noise isn't gone, but it's quieter. Marcus actually listens. He understands the scope, the complexity, the time commitment. When the client asks about availability, Marcus doesn't panic agree. He pauses. He prices the work based on what it requires, not on what he's afraid to lose. This is what behavioral researchers often describe as cognitive bandwidth. When money is tight, part of your brain is constantly occupied with survival math. That mental load doesn't just feel stressful, it limits decision-making, attention, and negotiation ability. When income stabilizes even slightly above survival mode, that bandwidth starts to come back online. Marcus didn't suddenly become more talented. He just regained mental capacity he'd been operating without. But the grocery store moment matters for another reason. For years, Marcus's identity around money was built on hope. Hoping the month would work out. Hoping no surprises would hit. Hoping someday things would feel easier. That first higher earning month created something more powerful than hope, evidence. Psychologists sometimes call this a mastery experience. Once you've done something once, your brain treats it differently. The story quietly changes from maybe someday to this is possible for me. Of course, the mind doesn't update instantly. The very next month might dip, then rise again, then dip. Early success often triggers imposter syndrome, especially for people who've spent years struggling. The brain looks for proof that the good month was a fluke. Over time, consistency matters more than peaks. Eventually, enough data points accumulate that the internal narrative adjusts. Not overnight, but slowly and stubbornly. What that income level actually buys isn't luxury. After taxes, insurance, and basic costs, it may look far more modest than people expect. But the real value shows up in moments that used to feel catastrophic. A car repair becomes annoying instead of terrifying. A medical bill becomes a problem to solve, not a spiral. The emotional reaction changes before the bank balance does. That reduction in constant threat perception affects everything. Relationships get easier, conversations feel lighter, decisions stop feeling like gambles. Even small things shift, like ordering food without scanning prices or making plans without calculating the opportunity cost of every dollar. There's also a quieter, more complicated side effect. When your financial reality changes, your social dynamics often do too. Shared struggle is a powerful bonding force. When you step out of it, even slightly, it can create distance you didn't ask for. You may find yourself minimizing your progress or feeling oddly guilty for being less stressed than the people you care about. That tension is common, and it doesn't mean anything went wrong. It just means your circumstances evolved faster than your environment. The first $5,000 month isn't about the number. It's about crossing an invisible psychological threshold. It's the point where money stops dominating every thought and starts becoming a tool instead of a threat. You're not rich. You're not finished. You're just no longer stuck in constant financial triage. And once that noise turns down, even a little, everything else gets easier to hear. The strange thing about earning more money is that your life doesn't just change on paper. It changes where you exist. You start spending time in different places, talking to different people, worrying about different things. You're not betraying old friends or forgetting where you came from. You're just drifting, almost unconsciously, toward people whose financial reality looks more like yours. That distance isn't moral. It's gravitational. And it sets the stage for a mistake almost everyone makes next. Marcus didn't see it coming. For 5 straight months, his income stayed in that new range, $5,000 to $6,000 a month. For the first time in his adult life, he had savings. Not much, but enough to notice. A few $1,000s sitting quietly in an account, not immediately earmarked for rent or debt. The panic was gone. The stress had softened, and his brain told him a very convincing story. You did it. You can relax now. That story is where the trap begins. Nothing Marcus does next is reckless. In fact, every decision makes perfect sense on its own. His lease ends, and he moves into a slightly nicer apartment. It costs a bit more, but it has in-unit laundry and doesn't smell faintly like old carpet. That feels like progress. A couple months later, he replaces his aging car. Not a luxury vehicle, just something newer and more reliable. There's a payment now, but it feels justified. He upgrades a few subscriptions, joins a gym he's been postponing, starts buying better coffee because, finally, he's not exhausted all the time. None of this feels extravagant. It feels earned, and that's why it works so well. By the end of the year, Marcus is making more than he ever has. But when he checks his savings, the number hasn't really grown. In fact, it's barely moved. His income went up, but his fixed expenses quietly followed. Then something small but annoying happens. A routine car issue, tires, alignment, nothing dramatic. The bill lands, and suddenly he's reaching for a credit card again. That's the $5,000 trap. You're not broke in the same way anymore. You're just broken at a higher resolution. This pattern shows up at nearly every income level. As earnings rise, expectations rise with them. The brain recalibrates what normal looks like almost instantly. What once felt like a luxury becomes baseline. Behavioral economists sometimes describe this as hedonic adaptation. You adjust faster than you think, and once you adjust, the stress creeps back in unless something structural actually changed. Marcus eventually notices the contradiction. He's earning more, working harder, and somehow still feels uneasy about money. That discomfort becomes a signal. Instead of chasing relief through another upgrade, he pauses. He does something that feels almost absurd. He starts paying attention again, not because he has to, but because he wants to understand where the money is actually going. He notices how much convenience costs, how small recurring expenses stack quietly, how lifestyle upgrades, once locked in, don't feel optional anymore. Over a couple months, he trims things that don't add real value. He cooks more. He saves deliberately, not heroically, just consistently. The numbers finally start moving in the right direction. And here's the subtle payoff most people miss. Savings don't just sit there. They change how you sound when you talk to other people. A client reaches out with a rushed project and unrealistic expectations. Old Marcus would have accepted out of fear. Current Marcus doesn't. He responds calmly, sets boundaries, and is willing to walk away. Not because he's arrogant, but because he has options. And people can sense that. Desperation has a tone. So does stability. There's another ceiling Marcus eventually runs into, one that isn't about spending at all. Time. Every dollar he earns still depends on his hours. No matter how busy he gets, there are only so many weeks he can stretch before burnout shows up. This is where many freelancers stall. They earn more, but they don't earn differently. Marcus experiments. He shifts away from pricing based purely on time and toward pricing based on outcomes and scope. He loses a client who doesn't see the value. Others don't hesitate. One even seems surprised he wasn't charging more already. The work doesn't get easier, but it gets more intentional. His income becomes less fragile because it's no longer tied entirely to hours worked. Months later, Marcus finds himself back in the same grocery store where this whole story started. Same checkout line, same total, but the moment feels different. Not triumphant, not cinematic, just normal. That's the part no one warns you about. Progress doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like the absence of noise. The myth is that there's a finish line where money stops being a concern. In reality, there are just levels where different problems become manageable. The first real income threshold doesn't solve everything. It simply ends survival mode and makes strategy possible. If you haven't reached that point yet, it's easy to believe the number itself is magic. If you have reached it and still feel stuck, that doesn't mean you failed. It usually means you treated a foundation like a destination. The grocery store moment doesn't decide anything by itself. What matters is what you build after it. Whether you spend the relief immediately or you quietly convert it into stability. Because the real upgrade isn't the apartment, the car, or the lifestyle. It's the moment emergencies stop feeling like emergencies. That's when the game actually changes.